Good morning, church family. It's so good to be back with you today. So good to see everybody. If I can just fess up, I was really enjoying John chapter 6. I am really sorry to see John chapter 6 go. I mean, that was a saga. That was cinema, is what that was. But call me crazy, but I really don't think that it's going to be letting up anytime soon. I think we're going to have just as much fun in John chapter 7 as we head over into this new chapter. I said when we started this series, I made the statement in our introductory message. I said, who you believe Jesus to be is the most important question you will ever ask. And then what you do with that information and how you respond to that information, that is the most important thing you will ever do. Well, we saw over the past several weeks with that crowd in John chapter 6, what they did with that information, what they thought about that information. They thought Jesus was their meal ticket. And we saw what happened with that. They walked away disappointed. They left disappointed. Well, in John chapter 7 now, as we're heading into that unit, we're going to encounter a whole lot of opinions about Jesus. A whole lot, a range of opinions about Jesus and who Jesus is. Some people thought he was just a big joke. Some people thought he was just a good man. Some people thought he was a trickster. Some people thought he was a deceiver. Then you had people who thought, well, at the very least, he's just a good teacher. You have opinions. You have people thinking that he was demon-possessed. And then you have some people who say, maybe, just maybe, this man is the Christ. Maybe, just maybe, this man is the Messiah. And we're going to see every one of these opinions in this chapter coming up. We're going to see people holding each and every one of these opinions as these people try to figure out who they think Jesus is. And throughout all of this, the opposition to Jesus, it's just going to keep growing. It's just going to keep getting stronger as those religious leaders, as they're going to just, the opposition to him is going to keep mounting, and they're going to get more and more desperate to eliminate him. And in this chapter, in this text today specifically, we're also going to see that a lot of the opposition to Jesus is coming from his own family opposing him. So we're also going to see a very simple truth. All of this is going to kind of culminate in a very simple truth about Jesus. And this is really just, this is the high mark of it all. This is the central thrust. This is just the main point. This is what I really just want to impress upon you today, is when it comes to Jesus, you can love him, you can hate him, you can't escape him. You just can't. So please flip with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 7. Today we're reading verses 1 through 13. I'm calling this sermon, Guess Who? And it is inspired by the way the people all throughout this chapter are trying to figure out who they think Jesus is. And I hope you had a chance to appreciate the visual of Jesus playing the game Guess Who with a Pharisee a moment ago. But I also want to encourage you, and we're going to look at three truths that we're going to pull out of this text today. Family is tricky. We're going to talk about that. Timing is everything. And possibly my personal favorite, everyone's an expert. So let's dive in. We're going to look at this. John chapter 7. Today, like I said, we're reading verses 1 through 13. Would you read with me, please? The Word of God says, after this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now, the Jews' feast of booths was at hand. So his brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify about it that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come." After saying this, he remained in Galilee. But after his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he also went up, not publicly, but in private. The Jews were looking for him at the feast and saying, "Where is he?" And there was much muttering about him among the people. While some said, "He is a good man," others said, "No, he's leading the people astray." Yet, for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly about him. So again, the first piece of encouragement I want to give you today is family is tricky. Family can be a tricky thing. You know, some of us come from close families where everybody just gets along and sees each other all the time. Some of us do not. Some of us get along very well with our families. And then for some of us, our families drive us absolutely nuts. Some of us see our families all the time. Some of us don't. Some of us have a lot of tension. Some of us don't. But no matter where you fall on that spectrum, listen, no family is immune to tension. No family is immune to a little bit of strife, to a little bit of bickerings. Sometimes we say things we don't mean. Sometimes we say things we wish we could take back. Sometimes we do things we wish we could take back. Sometimes other people say things to us in our family that they wish they could take back. But at the end of the day, we're family and we love each other. But sometimes it can be our faith and our faithfulness to Jesus that creates the tension in our families. Sometimes our attempts to be faithful to him is what drives some of the tension and some of the bickering, especially if you're a Christ follower and you have people in your family who are not, especially in some of those kinds of situations. Sometimes this can cause all kind of extra difficulty. They don't understand. Maybe they don't want to understand. But just know that if this is you, or if you've ever experienced this, you are in good company. Because do you know who else had trouble with his family over his religious stance and over his convictions? Yeah, Jesus. We see it very vividly in this text that Jesus himself experienced this with his family. His own brothers thought he was something of a joke. They taunted and mocked him. And we see that here. We see this very clearly in verses 1 through 5. And they're basically just kind of mocking him at this point. Now, this can come as a bit of a shock to some people, especially when they learn that Jesus had brothers. That can come as a shock to a lot of people, especially if you're somebody like me and you grew up thinking Jesus had no brothers, because you were taught, like I was, that his mother Mary remained what we would call a perpetual virgin her entire life. And the first time you encounter a text like this, you're like, wait, what? This is, we talked about the eating the flesh and drinking the blood a few weeks ago. This is, just to be perfectly honest and to be, with all due respect, this is one of those teachings that, with all due respect, it's all around us, especially in this city where we live and with the major denomination in this area. But this is one of those teachings that not only is it not in the Bible, but it actually contradicts clear teachings that are in the Bible, especially when you look at passages such as Matthew chapter 13, verses 55 and 56, where we see Jesus. If you go home later and look at that passage, you will see Jesus teaching in his hometown. And the people get offended and they say, who does this guy think he is? We know him. We know his family. And they start listing off his brothers by name. It starts naming his brothers. It even mentions his sisters. And they're like, we know him. We know where he's from. We know his family. What is he doing? And that's where Jesus says it's in his own hometown that a prophet is without honor. And then we also see from passages such as Mark 3:21 that his brothers thought he was a little cuckoo. They thought he was nuts. In Mark 3:21, he's teaching, and they actually think to themselves, he's embarrassing the family. We need to go get him. And they take off to go get Jesus and reclaim him and bring him back. And And he doesn't go. That's the passage where he says, "Who are my mother and my brothers? It's those who follow me." It's those who follow me. So when chapter 7 starts, it's been about 6 months since the end of chapter 6. Now, if you're just reading this straight through, you might get the impression that no time has passed, but just understand it's been about 6 months since the end of chapter 6. If you recall, back in chapter 6, I think it was around verse 4, it mentioned that chapter 6 was taking place during the Jewish Passover feast. And then we see in this text right here, chapter 7, verse 2, places this story during the Feast of Booths, which also goes by the name the Feast of Tabernacles. And so we know, because we know their calendar, these festivals are about 6 months apart. Passover would generally be sometime around March, April, and then the Feast of Tabernacles somewhere around September, October. They followed a lunar calendar. It didn't always fall on the same date, but they're always about 6 months apart. And if you're still not clear when we start talking about feasts and Jewish feasts and all this, just think religious holiday. These are just religious holidays that usually involve a lot of celebrating. And this was one of those. There are 3 major Jewish religious feasts. These are the so-called pilgrimage festivals. Now, these are the 3 big ones. There's 3 big ones, and this is one of them. And the pilgrimage festivals, they're much bigger occasions, and they're called pilgrimage festivals because customarily you would make a pilgrimage into Jerusalem to celebrate this. So think about everybody coming to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Everybody goes to Jerusalem for these Pentecost festivals. So I say all that to say because for whatever reason, John chose not to tell us about what went on during those 6 months. We have this huge saga, this huge cinema saga that takes place in John chapter 6, and then about 6 months pass, and then John chapter 7 starts. But if you're wondering, I assure you, Jesus was not sitting back watching YouTube during those 6 months. If you look in your study Bibles probably have something called a harmony of the Gospels. And if yours doesn't have a harmony of the Gospels, you can go online and find one. But what a harmony of the Gospels does is it takes all the events from all 4 of the Gospels and it kind of puts them all together and it tries to arrange them in chronological order so that you get like one consistent story of Jesus and you can kind of follow along. And if you will go look at one of those chronologies, one of those harmonies of the Gospels, you will see Jesus was very, very active during those 6 months. Just for whatever reason, John didn't include that. And I feel him. I told you, he wrote this gospel, John chapter 20, verse 31. I write these things so that you may believe that, Jesus is the Christ, and that by believing you will have life in his name. And he's selecting his stories very intentionally to make a point. But as a pastor, as a preacher who often has to figure out what to not include in a sermon, I feel his pain here as that he has all this great material that he just felt like he couldn't include here. And so there's been about 6 months that have passed before the start of John chapter 7. And if you look at verse 1, we'll see why he's been staying in Galilee during this time. So for that whole 6 months, he's been hanging out in Galilee. He hasn't left Galilee. He's never gone back to Jerusalem. He's been hanging out. We learn why. Because down south in Judea, in Jerusalem, where the temple is, they're still looking to kill him. There's this whole conspiracy still going on where they're trying to figure out how to get rid of this guy. If you remember, the last time Jesus was in Jerusalem back in chapter 5, things didn't go so well. He healed that paralytic man, and then everybody got on his case, and they ended up wanting to kill him. He's never been back since then. And just to be clear, Jesus is not scared of these people. He's not avoiding Jerusalem out of fear. He's not fleeing from them like we're supposed to flee from temptation, which is something our men's Bible study talked about yesterday, fleeing from temptation. He's not scared of these guys. He's not fleeing from these guys. It's just that it's not time yet. He's in no rush to provoke a situation with these people before the scheduled time. He still has a lot of ministry to do, and he still has a lot of training to do with his disciples. They still require a lot of his training time, and he's still working on that. But his brothers are making the trip. They're leaving for this festival. And in verses 3 through 5, we see them basically taunting Jesus, just basically taunting him. And we know this because A, their tone, I mean, you can read it and you can read their tone, but B, because verse 5 tells us that at this point, they still don't believe in him. They do not believe in Jesus. So this is what they say. I'm quoting from the text here. It says, they say, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. So let me paraphrase what they're telling him here. They're saying, hello, brother. If you are truly intent on making these people think you're this Messiah guy, then how's about you stop doing your little tricks in the back streets of Galilee? And why don't you go to Jerusalem and do your tricks on the big stage? Oh, and it works out great for you because there happens to be a crowd there right now. There's a festival going on. There's a crowd there. So they're taunting him. And this is why I say family is tricky. Family can be tricky. If your faithfulness to Jesus ever causes tension within your household or within your family, just know that you are in good company. Jesus endured this. Jesus went through this. Jesus went through this exact situation. And I'll say this too, at the end of the day, some of our family may never get us. They may never understand. And quite frankly, that's on them. If we're being faithful and if we're doing what we're supposed to do and we're acting like we're supposed to act, not being mean, not being preachy or scoldy, but if we're being faithful followers and our family has a problem with that, quite frankly, that's on them. That is on them. And we all are going to run into that probably sooner or later if you haven't already. What I can say is that Jesus died for us and for our salvation. And one of the benefits for us that brings is that he has placed us into a spiritual family. And this spiritual family will follow us into eternity. If you are a Christ follower, that is what you have to look forward to, is the spiritual family that follows you into eternity. Encouragement number 2 today is timing is everything. And we see an illustration of this in verses 6 through 10, timing being everything. When Jesus answers his brothers, he says in verse 6, my time has not yet come. But he says, your time is always here. Notice the distinction there. My time has not yet come. Your time is always here. Remember, Jesus is on that God time. Jesus follows that God clock. Jesus goes where the Father tells him. Jesus goes when the Father tells him. And what he's trying to communicate here is the time's just not right for him yet. He hasn't been given those commands yet. The time is not right. But do you know who's not on the God time? Do you know who's not? Everyone else. Everyone else. And specifically in this situation, that includes his brothers. His brothers are definitely not about that God time because they still belong to the world at this point. They still belong to the world and they're still following the world's ways. And Jesus is making that point very, very emphatically here. He says in verse 6, but your time is always here. I can only go when the Father tells me to go. Your time is always here. You can go. So don't miss what he's doing. He's drawing a distinction between himself and his brothers. He's making this huge distinction here. They're not the same. They are not the same. He even says in verse 7, the world can't hate them like it hates him. The world can't hate them like it hates him because they still belong to the world. They're still of the world. They're still a part of that system. So the world is not going to oppose them like it's opposing him. The flip side of that, by contrast, Jesus is not a part of that system. Jesus actually testifies against that system. He says it hates me because I testify that its works are evil. So he tells them, he says, you go on up. You do it. You go. I'm not going to this feast, he says, for my time has not yet fully come. And so for clarity here, you're going to see a lot of other translations maybe, and definitely a lot of the other manuscripts will say, I'm not going yet. I'm not going yet. That's because this verb here, the present tense of this verb, more literally could and probably should be read, I'm not going right now. I'm not going at this moment. I'm not going with you. I'm not going now. And in case I was reading that and it sounded like some people will say, well, was Jesus lying? Did he lie? Was he deceiving the people when he said, I'm not going? No, he was not deceiving anybody. He wasn't saying he was never going. He was saying, I'm not going right now. At this point in time, God the Father had not yet given him the direction to go. He's waiting for God to tell him, and he said, I'm not going right now. You go. It's not time. But then at verse 10, we see that after some time has passed, he did get the go-ahead, and he went to Jerusalem. But as far as we can tell, he didn't go to the festival. He went to the temple. So that's a key point here. We're not going to read this verse today, but in verse 14, we're going to see the festival is already half over by the time Jesus gets there. And so he didn't go up with them, and he wasn't going to make a big scene. He went separately. He went on his own, and he didn't go, as far as we can tell, to the festival itself. He went and made a beeline for the temple so he could resume his teaching. But as he went privately. You remember, they were like, hey, do your thing on the big stage. Make a show of yourself. The text tells us when he did go, he went privately. In other words, incognito. He wasn't drawing a lot of attention to himself. He went kind of privately, kind of like laying low, basically. He did it the exact opposite of how his brothers wanted him to go. He did it in his time, and he did it in his own way. But again, the key point here is that timing is everything. If you are a Christ follower, and I want you to just hear this very clearly, if you are a Christ follower, the when is just as important as the what. It's not just what you do, and it's not just what happened, but it's when. The when is just as important as the what if you're about that God time. Let me put it like this. I could go right now, maybe not right now, that would not be good, but I could go after church today. I'd have to wait till after the leadership meeting, but later this evening, I could go up to City Park, and I could go walk up the long street or run up the street to the New Orleans Museum of Art, and I could go run right past that museum. And do you know what would happen? Absolutely nothing of importance. Nothing. I would just be some dude running up the street. But do you know that there was a specific moment in time on April 19th that if I would have done that exact same thing and run past that exact same spot, there was a specific moment in time on that date where if I would have done the same thing, I would have won the Crescent City Classic. If I go right now, nothing. Nobody cares. But there was a specific time on the clock on April 19th, if I would have crossed that exact same spot, I would have won the Crescent City Classic because that's where the finish line was. Timing is everything. When something happens is just as important as the fact that it happens. You can do the right thing too early or too late, and you don't get the same result. God knows this. Jesus knows this. But we need a lot of help remembering this because we forget this all the time. And I think one of the biggest areas, quite frankly, where we could use a lot of reminder about this is in our prayer lives. You know, because we're so quick to sit down and pray, and you know, we get up from the prayer, and if we don't get exactly what we prayed for, that either right then and there or maybe that day, then we come away thinking either God wasn't listening, God didn't hear me, or I guess the answer was no. God said no. Well, no. Maybe God didn't say no. Maybe God said not yet. Maybe that's what he was doing. Or think about it like this. If you're a parent, and a lot of us in here are parents, then I am sure you have experiences where you had a gift for your kid and you withheld it until a specific time. A special time, or a right time, maybe a celebration, a birthday, there was just something you wanted to give your kid, but you had to wait for graduation because it was a graduation present, or maybe there was some special significant day coming up, but you had a gift for your kid and you withheld it because you were waiting for just the right time to give it. And if you would have given it any other time, it would not have been as significant. It would not have been as impactful. Well, listen, God does that too. God does that too. In fact, he does that all the time. If you look at the greatest gift God ever gave us, and he gave us all a really, really big gift once, and that was our salvation. In Romans chapter 5, verse 8, what it says about that, it says, for while we were still weak, or some translations say while we were still sinners, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. At the right time. Not one day sooner, not one day later, but at the exact right time, Christ died for the ungodly. So please, this is my encouragement to you, please don't lose heart. If there's a desperate prayer in your heart, a desperate prayer request, something you're asking God for, and as of yet, it seems like it's been unanswered. Don't lose heart. I'm not saying you're going to get it. I'm not saying it's coming. But what I am saying is God might just be waiting for the right time. Him giving you that right now might just not be the right thing. So maybe God's just waiting for the right time. What we need to do is we need to learn how to trust his timing. We need to be thankful for his timing. We need to trust his timing. We need to trust his wisdom. And we need to thank him for his goodness, that he knows the difference and that he has good gifts for us. My third piece of encouragement, and maybe the one that's been speaking to me the most lately, is that everyone's an expert. I don't know if you've noticed this, but everybody knows everything. Everybody knows everything. So clearly I mean this a little bit sarcastically when I say everybody's an expert. If I have learned anything, and I mean like anything at all from social media, it is that everybody knows everything. Everybody's a political scientist now. Everybody's a virologist now. Right? Everybody knows everything about diseases and vaccines and all this stuff. Everybody is an economics professor. Everybody, the same people that could not figure out how student loans were supposed to work are now lecturing us on how tariffs work. Everybody's an expert. Everybody knows everything. Economics, it's everywhere. And I'm so glad I'm so surrounded by so much expertise all the time. Actually, and sarcasm, the truth is more like this. Everybody has a strong opinion about everything. That's actually what it's more like. Everybody has a strong opinion about everything, even if their actual experience level does not justify the passion with which they hold that opinion. So, and this is what we face here. And just to be clear on this, and we see this here, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. It's just that in the old days, before social media and things like that, if you felt passionate about something or if you felt strongly about something, you actually had to work to get your opinion out there. You actually had to go out there and work to get that opinion, to make that known. And you had to put in effort to get people to hear you. And it had to make sense or it wouldn't even take off. So like you had to actually have real passion and you actually had to have something worth saying in the old days. Now it's so easy. All you have to do is click post or click send or you just click it, blast it out there, and boom, it's out there. So it makes it so easy to have this quote unquote passion, and it makes it easy to have a passion that's not even real. The reason everybody can be so passionate about everything is because they don't have to put any actual effort into it now. So everybody's passionate about everything. Everybody gets worked up about everything, but it wasn't always like that. But the important thing here is that people still had opinions, even in the old days. They may have had to work a little harder to get it out there, but they still had their opinions, and we see a whole lot of opinions in this text getting thrown around, specifically their opinions about Jesus. Who is this guy? Where is this guy? You see it right there. Jesus isn't even there. They don't even know if he's coming. He hasn't been there in at least 6 months. And they're looking around like, where's Jesus? Where's he at? And that's all they can talk about. All they can talk about. Where is he? Who is he? Is he a joke, like his brothers were saying? In verse 12, there's this whole debate going on about whether he's a good man. Hey, I think he's a good man. And then these other people saying, no, he's deceiving everybody. He's a trickster. But notice at the feast, this is all they can talk about. There's this whole celebration going on. Everybody's talking about Jesus. It was like the Coldplay Kiss Cam of the first century. It's like all they want to talk about. It's like all they're doing is doing this, but not openly. Be careful. Don't talk too loud. Verse 12 says they were muttering. Remember the grumbling from a chapter ago? Well, now they're muttering. They can't talk too loud about this. They got to keep it down. They have to be careful. They need to be careful the wrong people don't hear them. So these are like hushed conversations in corners, maybe in alleyways, down low. We're not going to talk too loud, but it's all we're going to talk about. Verse 13 tells us why. It says, yet, for fear of the Jews, no one spoke openly of him. Now, this is one of those instances where the term Jews refers to the religious leaders. These are the religious authorities. So the regular people that are walking around, they're having these conversations, but they're trying to be careful that the religious leaders don't hear them. Now, you've seen, I'm sure, movies or TV shows that take place in a little small town. I'm not saying Jerusalem's a small town, but go with me here, where, the town has gathered. They're at the diner, they're at the tavern, they're wherever they're at, they've gathered, and all they're talking about is whatever's like the big news in the town, like the gossip in the town. And they're all like talking, and then the sheriff walks in, or then the mayor walks in, or then like one of the people that's involved in the gossip walks in, and everybody stops talking. We've seen that, right? Because why? You don't want to be the one to catch their attention. You don't want to be the one to set them off. If it's some big scandal and the sheriff walks in, you definitely don't want to be the one to attract his attention, because that dude's in a bad mood. He's mad. So we're all talking about it, but don't let them hear you talking about it. That's what's happening here. That's what's happening here. It's all they can talk about. They just don't want to be overheard talking about it. None of them wants to be the one that the religious leader looks at and says, what was that? What name did I just hear coming out of your mouth? Jesus? Huh. Because these are the guys that, guess what? They don't like you, you're out. Like, you can't come back to the synagogue. You can't worship here anymore. They'll just kick you out the church. Like, you're gone. These religious authorities, the same people who are conspiring to kill Jesus as we speak, have the authority to put people out of the synagogue, and nobody wants to be the one that sets them off. They don't want to be that guy that gets put out. They're actually going to do this to some poor guy in chapter 9. In chapter 9, they're going to excommunicate somebody for no good reason. They absolutely have the power to do this. But that doesn't stop them from talking. It never does. They still have their opinions. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks they know who Jesus is. Everybody has something to say. And yet, notice, nobody gets it right. Nobody gets it right. At least the people who saying he's a good man, at least they're going in the right direction, but they don't have it right. Jesus isn't just a good man. Nobody quite gets it right. Everybody has an opinion. Nobody, though, has the full truth. And it's amazing to me because it's still the same way today. It is absolutely still the same way today. You have people who think Jesus is a joke, like his brothers did. So you look on social media, you watch movies, you watch TV, you hear the jokes. People mock Jesus. People make fun of Jesus. By the way, nobody gets away with that when it's any other religious figure. It always seems to be Jesus. We can mock him. So people mock him. People make fun of him. So people think he's a joke. You have people who think he was just a good man. You'll hear people say, no, I think he was probably all right. He was a good dude. He wasn't God, but I think he was a good man. Or you have people say, no, he was some kind of charlatan. I don't know what he was doing back in the first century, but he tricked a whole lot of people. We see all these same opinions today. They've just become a little more sophisticated, but it's the same type of opinions. But inevitably, even people who don't follow Jesus, even people who don't really know anything about him for real, nevertheless, they all seem to have very strong opinions about him. It's amazing. Everybody has a strong, or seems to have a very strong opinion about Jesus. And that's why I say you can love him, you can hate him, you can't escape him. It's the cutest noise I ever heard. You can love him, you can hate him, you can't escape him. And yet, these people who don't follow him and don't get their information about him from the actual Word of God, all of our information about Jesus came from a movie we watched or something like that, they get him wrong. They get him wrong. We've already seen in this gospel, we've seen it for 7 chapters now, how misunderstood he was. He was misunderstood everywhere he went. We need to keep in mind, as his followers, we're going to be misunderstood too. People aren't going to get us. They're not going to know where we're coming from. They're often going to have trouble understanding why we believe the things we believe and that kind of thing. And we're going to be treated oftentimes like he was treated. The same responses that we see him getting, we cannot be surprised or shocked when we get those same responses from people. Remember his brothers? Remember his brothers and how Jesus said the world couldn't hate them, but it hated him? It couldn't hate them, but it hated him? The world loves its own. Those who belong to the world loves its own. But if I can tell you anything today with just the utmost sincerity, we don't belong to the world. We're not. We're under different authority. We're under a different kingdom. Please don't ever forsake the path of Christ for the love of the world. Because you're going to find those 2 roads are not the same road. And you can't walk the road you're going and get to both of those destinations. Do not ever forsake the path of Christ for the love of the world. The quote, unquote, love that the world gives, it's cheap at best. It's cheap at best, and the world will give it cheaply, and it'll take it back just as quick. And you will never know. You will never know where you stand for real. It will give it cheaply, it will rip it away, and it will stab you in the back in a heartbeat. I grew up idolizing Hulk Hogan. I'll just tell you that. I cheered very loudly in my living room whenever we would order a pay-per-view and Hulk Hogan was wrestling. I listened to the crowds and how much the crowds cheered for him. In 2002, when he made his big return to the WWF and received what might have been like the loudest ovation I have ever heard in my life for a human being, that just went on and on and on. I was just enamored that one man could get that kind of a reaction from people. And I'm sitting there like, man, this is a moment. And then, if you know this, WWE moved to the Netflix network a while back, and they brought Hogan out for the first show on Netflix, and they booed him out of the building. And not like the way you're supposed to boo a bad guy in wrestling. He wasn't even a bad guy. But not that kind. It was like legitimate, we don't want you here booing. And it was like just surreal to hear him being booed that way. Now, granted, there are some things that have gone on behind the scenes with him. We'll not drag all that into it right now, and that's not even the point. That's not even the point. But, we lost the Hulkster this week. And they did a salute to him on Friday Night SmackDown last week, and everybody's back to cheering him now. Everybody loves him again, or at least a lot of people did. So it's just, we love him, we don't love him, we love him, we don't love him. Just watching this play out, it's like the world is so fickle. One day we love you, one day we don't, one day we do, one day we don't. And you never quite know where you stand. People make mistakes, people mess up, people say horrible things, people do horrible things, but you never quite know where you stand with the world. Because it could change in a heartbeat. The love of Jesus Christ is nothing like that. It is nothing like that. You always know where you stand with him. And he doesn't give his love in a cheap way, and he certainly doesn't pull it back, and he certainly doesn't stab you in the back like the world will do to us in a heartbeat. You sell out to the world, you sell out your convictions. Yeah, the world might love you for 10 minutes, but that same world will stab you in the back the first chance it gets. So here's what I want to leave you with. as we bring this to a close. You can't read a passage like this without coming away with a sense of just how completely other Jesus was from everybody else. I mean, like nobody got him, not even his family. But here's a key statement for you to remember. Jesus wasn't looking for validation from the lost people he came to save. Jesus was not looking for validation from the lost people he came to save. He came to save them, not be validated by them. Just try to imagine an artist trying to impress a blind man with how good his painting is and trying to get validation from that blind man. It doesn't really make sense, does it? It would sort of be a pointless endeavor. That's kind of what it would have been like for Jesus to try to get validation from the very people that he came to save. Like he came to save them from their sins and set them on the right path. How could he also expect validation from them for who he was? They weren't in no position to give it. And it's the same for us. It's the exact same for us. So when we as Christ followers start looking for validation from the world, we are quite literally performing for the wrong audience. We need to look at this passage and we need to take seriously how completely other Jesus was. And he was about his mission. He knew what he was doing. Sometimes Christ followers get discouraged. We get discouraged because we don't feel like we fit in with our families. We don't feel like we fit in with our coworkers. We don't feel like we fit in with our old friends from back in the day when we get together. It's like, man, I don't quite fit in with these people anymore. What's going on? Well, face front, true believers. You know what that means? That means the saving work of Christ is doing its job in you. That means you're not the same person you were. That means he is working in you and he is sanctifying you and he is changing you. That's why you don't fit in anymore. That's not something to be discouraged about. That means it's working. That means it's doing it. Jesus is doing what he promised he would do. He will see his good work to completion. That's what that means. The love and the praise that the world gives, like I said, it's cheap. And then it will stab you in the back. But one day we're going to receive our accolades directly from the mouth of Jesus Christ himself. One day we're going to get our accolades and our validation from him. We're going to stare into his face and we're going to hear out of his mouth, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come enter into your master's rest." We're going to get our validation directly from him. And it's not going to come, it's not going to be cheap, and he's not going to pull it away, and he will never stab us in the back. And then we will enjoy that, and we will bask in that, and we will bask in his presence for eternity.